Time doesn't erase murder. It just hides it better. They said the case was closed. They said no one was watching. But someone always is. This is Santana True Crime.
Welcome to Santana True Crime. Tonight we are live for the first time. I've got with me Dr. Brian Santana, and we are going to be discussing Nigel Max Edge, who is the suspect in the shooting investigation in Southport, North Carolina. For those that are unfamiliar with that case, that happened on September 27th of this year, actually. And and with that incident, I think this is the first time that it's happened on the coast where we've had a tragic event like that, where some people were just eating dinner on a nice day, and the restaurant is out on the water. I've got some pictures here.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Very scenic place where you can go grab a beer, a drink, and some fresh seafood. Very tourist destination, and Nigel opened up fire with a .300 blackout rifle, unfortunately killing 3 people and injuring 5. And so today, why we're having this show is he had the probable cause hearing, and Dr. Santana actually attended that hearing. So, Brian, what happened with that?
It was an interesting experience. So there's a lot of there's a lot of waiting when you go to the hearing. I think one of the things that for people that've read our book, A Murder on Campus, The Professor, the Cop, and North Carolina's Most Notorious Cold Case, available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, or wherever you buy your book. Thank you. There we go. A lot of the work we do with like cold cases, at least what my only experience was like doing records request and pouring through lots of pieces of paper and talking to people. And so it was a different to go see this in person, but there's lots of waiting. It's a case that you mentioned has attracted a lot of attention. We had 3 people killed, 5 people injured, and there could have been many more than that. And so it's a wild case. I was there this morning, and this is a case that attracted CBS News, Court TV, the New York Times, lots of places have covered this, and so there was a line to get in very early on. So I got out there. The courthouse opens about 8:30, but the clerk of court had told me that it was a good idea to get out there at least 2 hours before. So to ensure that you had a place in the courtroom. So I was out there. So I got there extra early, and I got there so early that when I got there, I was afraid I'd be in the back of the line, and I was like number 3 in line. So the sun's coming up, and I didn't have any food or drinks. So I'm like, I was standing out there and talking to a local reporter, and I realized some of the national media were smarter. They actually showed up about 8:15, and they still got in. So I didn't know how big the courtroom was going to be, but yeah. So lots of standing and waiting originally. And then we finally got into the courthouse about 8:30 in the morning, and we were directed to another line that was outside courthouse number 2 in Brunswick County, which is in Bolivia, North Carolina, small kind of coastal town. And
so this is starting to sound like Disney World.
Yeah,
you go into one line to be led
right
into a door for another line.
Yeah, it's exactly like that. And we were in the second line. You could actually hear the judge kind of like yelling at somebody for something, and the deputy locked the door and swiped his card. So there was like a red light on this. So we couldn't go in there. And so we were waiting, and we could hear all this like yelling and conversations going on. I didn't know like who was being yelled at or why they were being yelled at. And since I was at the front of the line, when we finally opened up at 9:15 was when they opened up the door and told us we could go in. And so you're not really sure what you're going to get. And you go in there, and I was sitting on the first row behind where the district attorney was, and district attorney's desk was. And one of the first things that happened is, the judge is like, he runs a very tight ship. He explained to us all the different ways we could get 30 days in jail, basically. So this was making sure your cell phones were silent, it wasn't not wearing a hat. They would tell you not to do that. I don't think they would throw you in jail for that. But they did say to make sure everything was silent, that this was an official recording and it could be used in the appellate process. And because of that, they took that very seriously. And any disruption, he said, was just going to be 30 days with the Brunswick County Sheriff. And so, and also cautioned that we were not to exit the room unless we were at official like session break. So that was kind of my introduction. I was sitting near some local reporters from the area, from Southport, where the crime happened, and some other surrounding areas in the coast, and a reporter from USA Today on my right. And so it was an interesting kind of mix of people.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are probably used to district court, and that's when a lot of riffraff will be in there where you're shoulder to shoulder with people, and they're talking about everything from speeding tickets to a simple assault to a DWI. That's kind of those general courtrooms.
Yeah.
You were in a superior courtroom, which is less cases, and that's when you have your juries and everything is, it's a tight ship normally.
Yeah, it was somber and quiet. Like there was, I think one of the things, like when we were sitting there waiting for the judge, walked in right at 9:30. And when we were waiting in the few minutes before everything officially got started, it was so quiet. You could hear there's I guess she was a clerk, or she was doing some kind of work for the district attorney, because she pushed this card over that had all this like a big section of files that were related, I guess, to the cases they were hearing that day. And you could hear the squeak of the cart's wheels because it was so quiet in there. So that was, there was not a peep from anyone during all that.
So what ultimately happened with the case that day?
So we knew that before we can get to that, let me just say one of the things that really surprised me was, so you got this high profile case, you're like out there at the crack of dawn waiting and stuff. And so I'm imagining, I've never been to court like this before. I'm imagining that, wow, this is a high profile case. We're going to do this one case and then go home, and that's it for the day. And I had no idea, and I know you've been to court many times, but like I had no idea that even a high profile case, you're dealing with several other cases during that same, let's say, 4-hour docket that the judge had like kind of set apart. There were like, I think 4 hours he had set apart for several cases. And it was just one of several, and it wasn't even given the top priority. It wasn't even the first one that they called. And so that was really fascinating to me. We had to sit through 2 cases, that were different motions. We saw an arrest warrant issued from the bench, and which was interesting, and it wasn't even the top priority. I kept wondering, like, am I in the right courtroom? Because when are we going to get to the actual case? I thought that'd be the only thing we were doing that day, but it was just. And one of the reporter from USA Today said their last arraignment said they had to wait for 4 hours through other cases before they actually got to Mr. Nigel Edge. And so that was a big surprise to me.
It doesn't surprise me because you're dealing with a smaller county too. And so they only had a couple courtrooms?
Yeah, there was at least on the floor where his hearing was, there was 4. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Logistically, they've got to get some of those cases pushed through and hear motions and deal with all that. And even when you go to federal court, it's like that. You don't, which is the highest level. You still have to sit and, hear about other cases until you have your trial.
Yeah, that part was really fascinating to see how all of that worked. There was a moment where the judge actually became frustrated because I guess he was primarily hearing things that had to do with discovery and probable cause, was my understanding, because there was a case that was called and he like visibly reacted and was like, who scheduled this in this court? This shouldn't be in my court. It should be in someone. He referenced another kind of courtroom, and it seemed like it wasn't what he was supposed to deal with that particular day. So it seemed like there was some kind of logic in the way they were organized.
Right. So what ultimately happened with the case today?
So there was a continuance. So there was this big buildup, and then all of a sudden, right before Nigel Edge's case was officially called, we saw an influx of law enforcement come into the room. We saw the sheriff of Brunswick County was there, and also the district attorney was there, and some other people. And so we thought, okay, so like these like notable people who looked different. They stood out and people were paying attention to them, walked in the room. So we were like, we're about to really get started with this. And then the district attorney conferred with the defense, and when they addressed the judge, they said they were filing a joint motion together asking for a continuance. So Nigel Edge's original probable cause hearing was scheduled for October 13th. And at that time, the defense had filed a motion for a continuance because his lawyer was supposed to be in a different county on the same day. So it was continued to today. And today, the district attorney and the defense attorney filed a joint motion asking for another continuance. And the judge granted that and ended up setting the new court date for January 8th for the probable cause hearing. And so I was speculating. I was talking with the reporters afterwards. We had to sit through another case or two before we hit the natural break where we were allowed to just leave. And when we were outside, we were talking about it, and there was a lot of different reasons about what does this actually mean, this continuance. And they told me it wasn't that uncommon to get several continuances for the probable cause. Basically, the way it works, like in North Carolina, and it's probably like this in other places as well. If you are charged with a felony and you don't have a grand jury indictment, you typically have a probable cause hearing. And so he was just arrested and charged with a felony. There has not been a grand jury indictment yet. So one of the reporters was speculating that the district attorney might have been buying more time and plans to file a grand jury indictment. Someone else had speculated to me, another reporter from the area this time, said he thought it was likely that there would be some kind of plea bargain and this would not get to actual trial because there was so much overwhelming evidence. And someone else wondered if the district attorney has not decided. He's publicly said he's still weighing whether to pursue the death penalty in this case. There are Nigel Edge has been charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder, 5 counts of attempted first-degree murder, and then 5 counts of some kind of, I believe it's some kind of weapons charge. But I could be wrong about the last one. But there was some discussion about whether the district attorney is going to pursue the death penalty, and he's still undecided. He's publicly stated that. So it's maybe there was more time that they were buying for that. So it's not entirely clear, but the caveat to all this is that if the district attorney does end up taking this to a grand jury between now and January 8th, then the need for the probable cause hearing in January will go away, right? The grand jury indictment will be the probable cause then. So, and we would probably have an arraignment before then, so where he would plead guilty or not guilty. So that's kind of where things were at. One of the things it was interesting because it's just, you're reminded that it's a very kind of slow moving, very deliberate process. And I think if you're only experienced with court as kind of watching it on TV, it's a very different experience seeing it in person.
Right. I always think it's funny when they spend so much time on the death penalty, but they actually don't. I mean, when was last time someone was actually,
No.
sentenced to death in North Carolina? Or not sentenced to death, actually, carried out.
Yeah, I don't know. When was
Sure there's been a moratorium on the death penalty for decades.
Yeah, and so it seems like, and that's the weird thing, that it seems like the capital pursuing capital punishment ends up getting you like a more complicated trial that might involve longer preparation, but there's not necessarily, when you go through all that kind of that end is not guaranteed.
Yeah, and I feel like that is one of those almost feel good sentences, like, okay, we're giving him the death penalty.
Yeah.
But he's going to be on death row for, 50 years. And when they're on death row, they get more stuff and more freedom. So it actually ends up working out well for him.
Yeah, and I think Nigel Edge is like complicated because, like, I mean, the evidence he did this is overwhelming. I mean, what's been widely reported, this is not like me, I've heard it from other people that have just been reporting this, that the Coast Guard, when they took him into custody, because this is basically like a drive-by on the Intercoastal Waterway, he was like firing from the water and was pulled over by the Coast Guard. He allegedly confessed immediately to the person of what he had done from the Coast Guard. And so it's just really hard. And there were search warrants served after that, and they collected a whole arsenal of weapons. And there's a lot of evidence that's against him. And it's just hard to imagine a scenario where, it's just really hard in some ways for me to imagine this really going to trial. I just don't know what the incentive would be to do the trial, aside from just having some public account. But this is a person that clearly has some deep, deep mental health issues. So
Yeah, and he's got some reasons for having mental health issues. I mean, he was shot in the head during combat, so we can give him that. I think that a lot of this, what will happen will be, there's a chance that he'll plead, insanity or make that type of defense.
Yeah.
And then there's the other chance of they just drag this out as long as, because it really is a lot of evidence that they have to go through.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of witnesses. I'm sure that they're, getting cell phone data and camera data and GPS data and whatever, there's a lot of agencies that worked on this. So they have to go through a lot on the prosecution side and the defense side. And no one wants to get embarrassed and lose this. This is not one that you're like, you know what? We're pretty sure that we can win it. We'll just wing it.
Right.
We'll go out there. We'll show a picture of the rifle. Like, those type of things would be disastrous. So
right.
I know that's frustrating for the public to sit and wait. And I'm sure when January comes around, love for you to go out there again, but it's going to probably get continued again, or that would not be a shock for me. And when this actually goes to trial, I would bet that this isn't until 2027 at the minimum if they actually go to trial.
Yeah, I was thinking this feels like a 2 or 3 year process, like from start to finish with any appeals or anything else. It feels like it's gonna be a very long time.
Yeah, and I mean, a good example of that is the Gilgo Beach cases, where that's a 2-year process, and the Brian Koberger case, that would have gone multiple years too if he didn't plead. But it is good because I think that it's a good checks and balance to make sure that the defense cannot come back later and make an argument saying that, oh, well, we weren't prepared. We didn't have enough time. Those type of arguments, there's not a good excuse for why they should be there. He's not getting out of prison.
No.
So
and that's the thing that I think is complicated about this, is like trying to figure out like what is the actual kind of end goal. I mean, like you said, he has some deep mental health issues, and there's people that will just play up and pretend like they do. I really believe he has mental health issues. I don't think that excuses him in any way whatsoever. I don't believe that should mitigate necessarily the punishment. But I am saying, if mental health issues do mitigate this at all, this feels like maybe just life in prison without possibility of parole. Like, I just wonder if you're a defense lawyer in this case, and you have someone who doesn't have so much as a speeding ticket before this crime happens, who is a decorated U.S. Marine, who served tours in Operation Iraqi Freedom and others, who is severely injured in combat, which is not debated, and develops severe mental illnesses after that, right? Like, is that enough of a mitigating factor to take the death penalty at least off the table, where he just spends life in prison? I think that's a pretty strong argument.
Yeah, he's got a documented TBI.
Yes.
And he also has, here's a picture of him here with his dog on the beach. He was wheelchair bound for a large portion after his injury. And of course, he suffers from PTSD. And all that I think is absolutely legit. I mean, like you're saying before, he was in the Marine Corps from September 23rd of 2003 until June of 2009. He obtained the rank of sergeant. He was assaultman as well as in recon. He was in Operation Iraqi Freedom for from January to August, and then from March to May of 2005 and 2006. He's been awarded the Purple Heart, the Combat Action Ribbon, Iraqi Campaign Medal, with 2 Bronze Stars. And yeah, I mean, he was ambushed and shot in the head. I mean,
Right.
that's a legitimate reason for having, mental health reasons, not to excuse his behavior that day,
Right.
and not to say that he shouldn't be punished. But I think that brings up a couple issues. One is he really fit to stand trial?
Yeah.
And two, I think a larger issue is I think this is a good example of what happens when we don't take care of veterans.
No, I think that's exactly right. I think this
They're
is
not
one of
getting
the
the
things.
proper care. Um,
Yeah, like I kept wondering, like, who is following up with this guy? Because this is someone he starts to show some deep red flags about a year before this incident happens. He files 12 lawsuits, and some of them just look batshit crazy. Like he files a lawsuit against a church this near Oak Island, and he essentially is accusing them of being sex traffickers who are pedophiles and like all this stuff. And he goes to court so many times that the Brunswick County judge finally tells him, I'm going to hold you in contempt of court if you keep filing frivolous lawsuits. And I kept thinking, like, when you get to like 10, 12 lawsuits that just sound really unhinged, and this person is a combat veteran that has a legitimate mental illness, it just feels like this should have been a deep red flag for someone to really try to step in to see what's going on with him.
yeah. And I don't think we even brought this up, but Nigel is not his real name.
Right. Yeah.
He changed his name a few years back, and I think that would be another red flag. His real name is Sean William. I'm going to butcher this, but
Yeah.
Devosis or something like that. Yeah.
Listen up.
Y'all can look that up. But yeah, I think my point being is that you change your name. He actually self-published a book as well. He's definitely got some physical injuries as well as just some notable, mental health stuff. Because it sounds like from reading the articles, like the community knew about his mental health.
Yeah, he was kind of a cop. He was known as kind of an erratic figure. That's the word that comes up from some of the residents. They thought he was like kind of erratic in his behavior, or had become that like over recent years. And so,
yeah, and his book was still out on Amazon.
yeah, we don't want to necessarily plug the book, but it is there. If you find his original name and you look for it, you'll get it, because it actually has better reviews than some books that I've seen on Amazon. It's like 3.9 out of 4 stars, and so it's it doesn't have as good of reviews as A Murder on Campus, The Professor, the Cop, and North Carolina's Most Notorious Cold Case, but it's but they're not bad. It has some better reviews than some books from our publisher. So it was.
All right, I'm going to throw it out there. It's a Headshot: Betrayal of a Nation.
Yeah. So, and in like, not to make like light of that, but this book sounds like kind of unhinged too. If you read the description, I mean, apparently some people really liked it. At least 50 people really did it. They gave it a pretty good rating, but it is it's very eerie in retrospect, seeing the cover image of that book, which is him. It's him holding a very large rifle. I'm like obviously not a firearms expert, but he's holding some very large rifle in like a combat zone. Like almost like a sniper kind of position with like a large scope. And so it's very eerie seeing that in light of what happened.
Yeah. And this is public knowledge too, that he actually used a 300 a blackout rifle with a large optic on it and a suppressor, and he actually took headshots allegedly.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what's been reported.
Yep. All the victims that were killed with a single headshot.
Yeah. So that was definitely intentional, and I was wondering of how if the federal government would get involved and
Yeah.
classify that as a terrorism act at one point because
Yeah.
of where it was on the water. Um,
That's true. The
but
intercoastal
I
waterway.
guess
Yeah.
so.
No, yeah, it was from the intercoastal waterway. Yeah. How does that space work? And yeah. But
Yeah.
do you think this complicates things for the DA like at all? Like I kept wondering that. So let's just pretend if you're the defense attorney and you have like this person's guilty, they're never getting out of prison. That seems like that's already kind of decided. And if your sole job as a defense attorney is just to make an argument that spares his life so he's in prison without the possibility of parole, I feel like the defense has a really good shot of doing that. Because these factors that we've described, that's enough. This seems like to me to take the death penalty off the table, enough of a mitigating factor. This seems premeditated. Everyone is describing this as premeditated. It's first degree murder. It's not that, but is this a death penalty case? And I don't know. And and again, that's not to diminish. I think this is such a terrible crime. I think that Southport is a beautiful area. It is such a safe community, and the ideas happen. It's traumatic for the people that are in this area. But I just wonder if like is part of the district attorney's hesitation, like you don't want to be the person in a high profile case that's getting national attention to go to court and lose. And is that part of the calculation, do you think? Like, is that like if we go and I'm getting death penalty, but especially if he's going to life in prison, but are you going to pursue the death penalty if you feel like this defense is going to have a really strong argument to I might not win that part of it?
Well, I think if the prosecution may be weighing that if the death penalty is on the table, there's no incentive to plead not guilty. I mean, to plead guilty.
Yeah.
You might as well just say, screw it. I'm going to take my chances because,
Yeah.
that you're receiving the max punishment. I think that is a very easy offer to make someone that's good for everyone because it doesn't drag the victims through all this and make them relive it. And I think that logistically, especially, with these high profile cases that are going to last years and years, and you're going to be devoting years of your time to it as well. If you can get, from a logistical aspect, get them to plead, to life in prison, I would see that as being the best option. But I don't think they're going to be, either side is going to be in, a rush to do so. Because, the defense is not going to want to ethically agree to something after, before they've gone through all the evidence. And I'm not sure how big his defense team is, but I would guess that his defense is probably appointed by the court. So yes, he will get an attorney has experience working capital murder cases because they have to be able to represent them. But he's not getting Karen Reed's 6-person defense team that just has an entire staff to go through things. I'm sure that he's going to get 1 or 2 lawyers and a couple paralegals working on this case. But it's going to be a lot of work. This is, they'll be spending every minute until January going through this case.
And so you think maybe part of the calculation then is it seems like the idea of, I know that insanity pleas are incredibly difficult to pull off and are very rarely successful. But I wonder if you look at his circumstance in particular for multiple years before this happened, and you say, maybe insanity is something that we have some shot with. That's not something we want to rule out.
It would be fun, and maybe we can do this in January, is bring on a
Mhm.
defense attorney because I would love to hear their point of view on this, but I would think that would be the most logical way to go.
Yeah.
And if you're gonna roll your dice on anything and plead not guilty, you're definitely doing that.
Right.
Because it meant, from my understanding, he made multiple passes before he shot, and he was arrested at the boat ramp.
Yeah, had been there multiple days on different days and was waiting for when there was the most people out there.
Yeah. So you can't
So,
say that, he didn't plan this or it was spontaneous, but I think what you can try to do if you're the defense team is to bring up this, documentation, which I'm sure he's got in his military file of
mhm,
PTSD and the TBI, and talk about the effects of that and how, this changed the course of his life and what control he really had. Now, again, I still think he needs to be held responsible, but
mhm,
I think that when you put that into a juror's hands,
mhm,
you may get some sympathetic jurors that uh,
mhm.
may be able to be swayed.
Well, there's a high rate of people in this region, whose family served in the military and who there's a large military population, a retired military and other things. And you have some jurors potentially on there with family members or maybe themselves or people they know who have suffered from similar issues from Iraq and other things like that. Then you have that might be a very compelling argument to make.
Yeah, I mean, North Carolina is home to Fort Bragg, which has 82nd Airborne and houses the 3rd Special Forces Group, I believe.
Mhm,
And also, you've got Camp Lejeune, that's what, an hour from Southport, if that.
mhm. Yeah.
Eh, and so, yeah, it's a lot of military in that region. And I think that's a very likely outcome that you would have some of those members on a jury.
Yeah.
So you said that the next hearing is in January, right?
Yeah, so right now the next hearing is January 8th. So I'm going to be checking on it weekly and see if there's any update, but that shouldn't change unless there is a grand jury indictment between now and January. So if there's a grand jury indictment, this probable cause hearing will go away. If they want to just use this extra time and we go to the probable cause hearing, then we'll be back on January 8th.
All right. Well, and you are going to be writing an article on this case and the PC hearing, right?
Yes. So I have an article coming out tomorrow morning that is through Medium's True Crime feed. Thank you. I will be posting it on my website. I'll be posting it on my Instagram as well, a link uh, at True Crime Professor on Instagram. And so, yeah, it'll be out there before lunch tomorrow. So Medium's True Crime feed.
All right, great. Well, if you want to support the show, and support us, you can buy our book, A Murder on Campus, The Professor, the Cop, and North Carolina's Most Notorious Cold Case. You can also like and subscribe to this channel, Santana True Crime. We also have episodes on Apple and Spotify, which this will eventually be posted to. And we have a show every Tuesday that gets released. Our next one that will be released Tuesday is with William Noguera, who has a book out called Through the Lens of a Monster. Actually, got it right here. And he spent 44 years in San Quentin on death row. He talks about his time learning about serial killer Joseph Naso. So he actually talks with Joseph for several years, and it's eventually been able to get his trust, where Naso starts telling him about murders that he's committed that the police do not know about, and also provides details to the police of where they can locate their bodies. So make sure you check out that show. It will be dropping on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, anywhere where you can get a podcast. Brian, thank you again for coming on, and good night.
Thank you. Good night.